Good afternoon. Welcome to Kenya News Update today. I'm your host, and we're coming to you live with breaking news and a deep dive analysis of a significant environmental event that unfolded in one of our nation's most treasured parks. A major fire erupted at Lake Nakuru National Park yesterday evening, threatening wildlife, habitats, and a critical piece of Kenya's tourism and conservation legacy. The Kenya Wildlife Service has confirmed the blaze has been contained after a tense 6-hour operation. But the questions are just beginning. How did it start? What was the true impact? And what does this incident reveal about the ongoing challenges facing our protected areas? We'll be exploring all of that today with perspectives from conservation experts, community voices, and an analysis of the emergency response. Stay with us. Let's begin with the facts as we know them. According to the Kenya Wildlife Service, the fire broke out at approximately p.m. on Friday, February 6, 2026. The initial ignition point was not within the park itself, but in the adjacent Lakeview Estate, a residential area bordering the park's perimeter. Driven by wind and dry conditions, the flames quickly spread from the estate into the protected area of Lake Nakuru National Park. The specific zone affected was the Honeymoon Hill area, a region known for its scenic viewpoints and acacia woodlands. KWS, in a public notice, stated that emergency response teams moved in swiftly. Crucially, they have confirmed that no human injuries or wildlife fatalities were recorded. The fire was declared fully contained 6 hours later, at around p.m. This immediate containment is being hailed as a success, but the story is far more complex than a simple timeline. To understand the stakes, we need to appreciate what Lake Nakuru National Park represents. Established in 1961, it's one of Kenya's first national parks and a UNESCO World Heritage Site as part of the Kenya Lake System. It covers approximately 188 square kilometers, but its global fame comes from its namesake, the lake itself, a shallow, alkaline soda lake that transforms into a breathtaking spectacle of pink. The park is world-renowned as a sanctuary for flamingos. At peak seasons, the lake can host over 1 million lesser flamingos, creating one of the greatest ornithological sites on the planet. But it's not just about the flamingos. The park is a designated rhino sanctuary, hosting both black and white rhinos. It's home to lions, leopards, endangered Rothschild's giraffes, buffalo, and a rich diversity of other bird and mammal species. The economic value is immense. Before the pandemic, tourism directly contributed over 12 billion Kenyan shillings annually to the Nakuru County economy, with Lake Nakuru Park being a primary driver. This isn't just a park, it's an ecological jewel, an economic engine, and a symbol of Kenyan conservation pride. Now, let's delve into the science of the threat. Fire, as defined, is the rapid oxidation of a fuel in an exothermic chemical process called combustion. It releases intense heat, light, and various reaction products. The visible flames are produced when the fuel, in this case dry grass, shrubs, and trees, reaches its ignition point temperature. In the hot, dry conditions typical of this region, that ignition point can be surprisingly low. The flames from such vegetation fires consist of carbon dioxide, water vapor, and other gases. The color and intensity depend on the fuel type and temperature. In a park like Nakuru, the primary fuel is cured grassland and bush, which burns rapidly and can generate towering flames and intense radiant heat that preheats adjacent fuel, causing the fire to spread at alarming speeds. Wind is the primary driver, acting as a bellows, supplying oxygen, and carrying embers far ahead of the main fire front to start new spot fires. This scientific reality made yesterday's 6-hour battle a race against physics and weather. So, how was the fire fought? The response, as described by KWS, was a coordinated multi-agency effort. KWS Rangers, trained as first responders, were on the front lines. They were joined by county fire engines from Nakuru. But a critical element, explicitly mentioned by KWS, was the involvement of local community members. This highlights a vital, and sometimes tense, relationship. Communities living adjacent to parks often possess invaluable local knowledge of terrain, water sources, and wind patterns. Their immediate assistance can be decisive. The tactics likely employed included creating fire breaks, clearing vegetation to rob the fire of fuel, and direct attack with water and beaters where safe. The fact that it was contained in 6 hours suggests the fire, while serious, did not reach a catastrophic, landscape-scale intensity. However, this leads us to our first major debate point, the cause and the recurring nature of such incidents. This is where perspectives diverge. The official line points to the fire originating in Lakeview Estate. This immediately raises questions about human activity. Was it a careless act, a discarded cigarette, an unattended cooking fire, or something more deliberate like arson or land clearing that got out of hand? Community advocates argue that blaming adjacent communities is an oversimplification. They point to underlying tensions. One perspective is that human-wildlife conflict drives resentment. When animals like buffalo or baboons raid crops from farms bordering the park, livelihoods are damaged. In some tragic cases, human lives are lost. This can foster a perception that the park is a burden, not a benefit. Could such resentment ever manifest in a deliberate fire? It's a serious allegation, but one that has been whispered in the aftermath of past park fires. The counter-perspective from conservationists is that regardless of intent, the result is the same, a threat to a national asset. They argue for better community education, more robust fire prevention campaigns, and tangible benefits from the park flowing directly to neighboring households to build a true conservation partnership. Let's quantify some of these challenges. Human-wildlife conflict is not an abstract concept. It's measured in real losses. In the last reported fiscal year, the Nakuru County government documented over 300 incidents of crop raiding by wildlife from Lake Nakuru Park, primarily affecting maize and vegetable farms in estates like Lakeview. The estimated financial loss to local farmers was in the range of 15 million Kenyan shillings. Furthermore, in the past 5 years, there have been 4 significant fire incidents in or around the park, with yesterday's being the most recent. This points to a persistent risk factor. On the resource side, KWS, like many conservation bodies, operates under constraints. While exact figures for Nakuru's firefighting budget are not public, national conservation spending as a percentage of GDP has been a topic of debate, with some analysts arguing it has not kept pace with the growing threats from climate change and human pressure. This brings us to the second major debate: preparedness and resources. Was the response as effective as it could have been? The containment within 6 hours suggests competence. However, experts we've spoken to raise pointed questions. One conservation analyst asked, 6 hours is good, but could it have been 4? What was the initial response time? How many fire engines were immediately available, and what was their water capacity? Another perspective comes from a retired KWS warden who noted, the dry season is predictable. Fire is a known, annual risk in these ecosystems. The question isn't just about responding to fires, but about proactive fuel management. Are controlled, prescribed burns being used effectively during the wet season to reduce the dangerous fuel load that builds up? This is a technical but critical point. Without such management, every dry season becomes a tinderbox waiting for a spark. The community involvement is praised, but is it formalized? Are there trained community volunteer firefighting units with basic equipment, or was this an ad hoc mobilization? The difference could be crucial for the next incident. Now, let's consider the environmental impact. While no animal deaths are reported, the ecological damage can be subtle and significant. The Honeymoon Hill area is a habitat. The fire would have destroyed insects, small reptiles, and ground-nesting birds' eggs. It has altered the vegetation structure. In the short term, the blackened landscape is vulnerable to soil erosion when the rains come, which could lead to siltation in the lake. However, fire is also a natural ecological process in savanna ecosystems. Many grass species are fire-adapted and will resprout quickly, potentially creating greener pastures that could benefit herbivores like buffalo and zebra in the coming months. The real concern is for less mobile species and for the overall frequency. If fires become too frequent, they can prevent trees and shrubs from regenerating, permanently converting woodland to grassland and reducing biodiversity. The long-term monitoring data will be essential. How much of the 188 square kilometer park was actually burned? Preliminary satellite analysis suggests the burned area may be contained to a relatively small portion, perhaps under 5 square kilometers, but ground verification is needed. We must also place this event in a broader context: climate change. East Africa is experiencing more frequent and severe droughts. The current dry spell has left vegetation parched. Scientific models project an increase in the frequency of extreme fire weather conditions: hotter days, lower humidity, stronger winds. What was a manageable 6-hour fire today could be the precursor to a multi-day, uncontrollable inferno in a future, drier year. This isn't speculation, it's a trend observed globally. Therefore, the debate expands from managing a single incident to future-proofing our parks against a changing climate. This requires investment in early warning systems, modern firefighting equipment like aircraft for water dumping, and landscape-scale planning that integrates park management with county and national disaster response protocols. Finally, let's examine the political and economic dimension. Lake Nakuru National Park falls under the national government's jurisdiction through KWS. However, the surrounding land and the county fire services are under Nakuru County Governor Susan Kihika's administration. Effective response requires seamless cooperation between these two levels of government. In the wake of this fire, will we see renewed commitments and resource allocations? Furthermore, President William Ruto's administration has championed a climate action and green growth agenda. Will this incident catalyze increased funding for park protection as part of national climate resilience? From an economic standpoint, any threat to the park's aesthetics and wildlife is a threat to tourism. A charred landscape, even if temporary, could affect visitor numbers in the short term, impacting hoteliers, tour operators, and curio sellers. The park's health is directly tied to the economic health of the region. In conclusion, the containment of the Lake Nakuru fire is a relief and a testament to the responders who worked into the night. No lives lost is the paramount victory, but to view this only as a success story would be to miss the critical lessons. This fire is a symptom of deeper, interconnected issues: the human-wildlife interface, resource constraints for conservation, the need for integrated fire management, and the overarching shadow of climate change. It highlights the fragile balance between protecting our natural heritage and addressing the needs of the communities that live alongside it. The flames are out, but the embers of these complex debates continue to glow. The response to this incident in the coming weeks and months, in terms of investigation, community engagement, and resource allocation, will show whether we are merely putting out fires or building a more resilient future for Kenya's iconic landscapes. This has been a Kenya News Update Today deep dive. Subscribe to Kenya News Update Today for continued coverage and analysis.